Welcome to the Clean Mentality Podcast, where we focus solely on what you can do daily to make your life easier physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Easton Dukevich. Let's get after it. So we're welcoming Anthony Guastella to the show. He's a self-made entrepreneur in the health and wellness space and running Anthony Guastella Wellness. He's a certified transformation wellness coach or transformational nutrition coach. Thank you for coming on the show today, man.
Hey, man. Happy to hear you, brother.
So we had an interview on your show earlier this week and catching up, with you on your path and everything. And so I kind of wonder, what's the reason you started your wellness company or your brand, and what made you want to become a transformational nutrition coach?
Yeah, man. It's a great question. So my dream has always been to play in the NFL, right? So ever since a kid, I've always been working so hard towards that, working towards being the greatest version of myself. And I was always kind of passionate about wellness, but football was always my thing. And it wasn't until I kind of been diagnosed with Lyme disease through a variety of situations, like emotional stress, physical stress, and basically it was a long 6-year process I undergone. Basically, learning all the tools of wellness, personal development, because I was this guy who's kind of was focused on all these positive habits in my life, right? And having all those seemingly taken away through this disease, it kind of left me with a decision, right? And when you take the word decision, day means like derive, and side means to cut. So essentially, you're cutting off any other possibility other than that thing. And I had to decide if I want to stay sick for the rest of my life, because I was told I could not get well, or I could make a decision within to actually get well. And ultimately, we're the sum total of the questions that we ask ourselves. So basically, asking more empowering questions lead you to more empowering answers. So I just made progress over those 6 years, man. And even in the darkest moments where it looked like I was never going to get well, I just kept pressing forward, like every single day, just making incremental steps every single day, focus on progress. And before you know it, man, you just keep getting better and better, and eventually completely healed myself. And now I'm at the point where I started a wellness journey, as you said, coach, podcaster, speaker, writer, and I'm just doing everything possible to get a message out there, man, because I know what it's like not to feel well. And I just feel like I'm on fire getting on the other side of that and just wanting to help people do the same.
Yeah, so in the moment of all this going on, like I know you had for a long time through freshman year, like had the like most of high school had the plan that you're going to go in the NFL, and your mind was set on that, and now your mind's set on this. But in that moment, what were you kind of feeling in the moment?
In the moment, man, like I knew I always wanted to get well. I just didn't know how it was going to happen, right? It's about walking by faith and not sight, essentially, because everything around me looked like it wasn't going to happen. But thankfully, like through my past journey before that happened, I had developed a strong inner fortitude that allowed me to keep pressing forward, allowed me to keep asking empowering questions. So ultimate thing there is like listen to your heart. And if you know there's something that is better for you, just got to keep going, man, because at the end of the day, it's your life, and your doctors, like they may be well meaning, but they don't walk in your shoes, right? Like they don't experience how
Yeah,
you feel, and you have to take 100% responsibility for your own healing. That does not mean that you don't have help. It just means that you have to take the decisions in your own hands.
yeah, man. I hear you. So you decided, take this mission on personally instead of rely on the doctors, which were already telling you, you know, there's no way of getting out of this. You're gonna be this way for your whole life. What were Other than the mental fortitude aspect, what other things were you doing in order to reverse Lyme disease? Because that's a huge thing, man.
Yeah, man, definitely. It was a combination of all things. Because when we talk about health, it's not just one thing. Like we think about nutrition, exercise, like those are the main two things that come to mind. Of course, those are extremely important pillars. And so basically like mastering those things. But how's your sleep? How's your stress? How's your relationships? Like if I can say the number one thing that helped me heal was actually coming in to who I am, meaning like discovering my purpose and the leverage points within me, because ultimately like our mind is going to lead to the decisions that we make, not just in terms of our health but in everything else as well. So that's kind of where I was at with that. And of course, like eating real food and sleep, exercise, all these types of things that I'm sure we're gonna get into deeper. And just like the foundational aspect is like, for me, it was building a solid foundation of who I am.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's more of all just a like a mental battle with yourself to take these actions and to, pursue it from that
Yeah, for
point.
sure, man.
Okay. So what happened next from after you reversed, you know, this horrible like disease that you had? Like what was your next steps from there? What was your next steps?
Yeah, so after I healed myself, the process of that, I went into getting in health coaching. So building a foundational business on that. And it's kind of expanding the mission. It's kind of like it did with the healing, like incremental processes. So the mission was to empower people with the tools of wellness and personal development to become the greatest versions of themselves. So podcasting was the number one thing for me that got me into that space. Like it was the number one thing I learned from. And it just seemed so impossible from where I once was. And so, and then just moving on in terms of speaking, uh, writing, just, and what I find in terms of doing this work is that it's not just like doing the work, but it's a personal development process. Like anybody who's really passionate about what they do, it's about becoming someone in that process. Like just being ravenous in terms of learning and wanting to just get better at what you do, like honoring the craft and devotion to daily excellence.
Definitely. I like that message, man. So I know you teach on like stress resilience. What are some things you suggest for the listeners to prevent stress?
Yeah, man. So I want people to think of stress resilience in two ways. So first of all, a lot of us think of like work stress, right? But think of something called your overall stress load. So every type of stress you can imagine. So nutritional stress, uh, relational stress, emotional stress, like all these kind of add up. So that being said, there are two fundamental pillars that help you not only be resilient, but help you relieve the stress in a much more healthy way. So the first one is something called hormetic stressors. A hormetic stressor is basically something that you do in the short term that strengthens your nervous system in the long term after you get adequate rest. So, some examples, of course, would be exercise, heat, cold, fasting, and sunlight. So, if I can, I'm gonna get into those pretty deep, and then we'll go to the next section. Exercise, of course, that is going to be the most obvious one. Like people know, like after the gym, you get stronger, faster after you recover. And there's so many benefits to weight training. Like it's very foundational. Like muscle is one of the most important things in terms of anti-aging and all that, just overall body wellness. And the thing about it is like what I like to say is like the most important exercise is exercise you're actually going to do, because a lot of people like they're kind of reluctant to go to the gym and whatnot. But of course, like you want to eventually like optimize that at some point. It's about getting started. What I like to talk about is unconventional training. So this is the use of steel clubs, battle ropes, maces, kettlebells, hydrocore bags, and basically there's something called asymmetrical training. So this is like training the entire body, because like in the gym, it's great. It has its place for sure, but because everything's parallel and whatnot. But with these tools, like a mace, it's like this long rod with a big ball at the end. So your body has to adapt to this weight, and it's kind of whole body movements there. So when it comes to heat, so sauna therapy, like you can get heat, of course, from the exercise as well. But sauna therapy has been used for tens of thousands of years. Ancient Finland, like what they used to do is they had these places where they pour hot water over these rocks, and this in confined place. And this would be the first origination of the steam sauna. So going from there, saunas, they have so many benefits, man. Like they have the most notable thing is called heat shock proteins, and what these do is they kind of stimulate muscle hypertrophy, just like exercise, but it's much more mild So saunas have actually been shown to kind of stave off muscle loss if you can't work out or something like that. So it's kind of very good for that. Very good for circulation. Endorphins, right? So there's something called diorphin. So it's kind of, this is what happens in the sauna. You get that molecule in your brain, but then when you get out of that, it's kind of sensitizes your brain to more pleasure. So like doing the hard things kind of makes life easier in a way. And what I want to note on saunas is that there's two foundational types of saunas. So you got the infrared saunas, and then you got the steam saunas. So the difference between the two is that the infrared saunas heat people inside, like heat whatever's inside, while the steam saunas, they heat the air. So the steam saunas typically get a lot hotter, like over 200 degrees, while the infrared saunas are not as hot, but you kind of, depending on the model that you kind of get the same type of sweat, same type of benefits because the heating is a little bit different, if that makes sense. So within the saunas, I like to note this as well because it's not, we hear these things, but what type of quality are you getting? Because a lot of these saunas, man, they use wood that off gases like a lot of chemicals when they're heated, and people don't think about that. So getting a high quality sauna doesn't do that. And another thing is EMFs or electromagnetic frequencies. Uh, a lot of these saunas are basically emit these things at high levels. So if you get a
Yeah.
sauna, make sure you're not like damaging yourself at the same time. So there's a lot of great companies. Clear Light is a great one. There's others as well. Basically EMF shielding, and they block all these frequencies that you don't want. So when it comes to cold, man, this has been used for thousands of years. The Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, he used this with his patients with a variety of ailments. The Spartans used this to be more adaptable in battle. Monks used it for ceremonies or spiritual alignment. So it has a wide array of practices here. And the benefits of this is it activates something called brown fat or brown adipose tissue. Now, it's brown because it is so rich in mitochondria, right? Mitochondria are these powerhouses of the cells. And brown fat is essentially a type of fat that burns fat. So cold has been shown to be the number one thing that actually stimulates brown fat. So it's great for weight loss strategy as well, by stimulating
Right.
that brown
Yeah.
fat. You know
So
that?
I can definitely relate to you on like the cold being a stress reducer and the proteins and all that come from it and the endorphins that you get from it because I'll do the ice baths every day too. So just to
Definitely,
relate
bro.
to you on that, you know what I mean? So
Definitely.
um so as far as like can we talk on meditation for a second? Because I think
Yeah,
that's kind of important.
yeah. I was
I
definitely.
don't mean to cut you off.
You're good, bro. Do you
So
mind if I circle back around that while I get the other two on the hormetic ones?
okay.
Yeah. So on the cold therapy, of course, the benefits with that, uh, the circulation, and some ways to do this for people. Just to give an example, if you want to start doing this. Now, everyone is going to be most accessible to a cold shower. Now, cold showers, of course, they get a lot of the benefits from this, and you can also do a cold plunge. You can also do, like, if you have a nature body around you, that would be awesome as well. And what I want to note on this is how to approach the cold, because a lot of people when they get in the cold, like it's kind of a one-time thing and they're done. Because what you want to do is kind of approach it with a stoic mindset, like understanding your why you're doing this, and approach it like exercise, because it's kind of like that. Like you may only be able to do like 30 seconds and not as cold, and then you work your way up. So it's kind of like this progressive thing that you do, and it gets stronger and stronger in that process. Another note on that is hot cold contrast. So combining the heat and the cold does a synergistic effect. So sauna and then going to the cold. And then like in
Right.
Finland, they do that like multiple times through. And there's so many benefits to that, basically amplifying that. And then so sunlight. This is another hormetic stressor, very important. So many of us are afraid of the sun these days. And like we're been told by our doctors, our physicians, like sunlight is kind of bad. You want to stay away from it, put your sunglasses on. And this is a very unfortunate message because sunlight is the very thing that gives life to this planet. And of course, you can not be smart about it. Of course, you can go out there 2 hours when you never get sun. That's not good. But the most important thing is to get this gradual exposure because that has unlimited benefits. You get, of course, the vitamin D. And how that happens, by the way, is the UVB spectrum of light interacts with the cholesterol in our skin to create vitamin D. But that's just one thing that we hear about. You can get into countless hormones, neurotransmitters, and like I cut out there for a minute. Yeah, your video.
I gotta plug this in. Can I? We'll save it right here.
Yeah.
Like just once.
So yeah, man, the benefits of sunlight are not something to be ignored. And so how we do this, of course, like we're here in Michigan, so the sunlight's not going to be all the time. But what we can do is understand that 70% of the photoreceptors that we have exists within our eyes. So just getting outside, even if it's on an overcast day, this is so important for setting hormones and the circadian rhythm. Like the number one cue for the circadian rhythm, which is basically the hormonal clock that sets your body up for the day, is light. So getting light as soon as you can through your eyes, that's all good. But of course, if the sun's out and you're able to get it, that's very important as well. And something I'll note real quick on the vitamin D thing is that it's only available certain times of the year. Like the sun has to be at a certain angle for it to work. Like there's UVB spectrum, and that's not out all the time. Only when the sun's at a certain angle, and like most notably, like in the winter, it's probably not going to be there as much. And if you're getting sun through the glass, that blocks UVB light. So keep that in mind. So you're not getting vitamin D through the glass. You're getting some other things, but just keep that in mind. And since we're here in Michigan, or if you're listening to this at a cold climate, there's so many devices. There's something called photobiomodulation, and that's just a fancy word for light therapy. And so using red light panels, or there's other things that like go in your ear, kind of because you have photoreceptors in your ear, light boxes. I mean, but there's the bulk of the research is on red light therapy or infrared light therapy, and there's so many different panels for that. So that'd be a good thing to look into. It's kind of like a supplement, like you supplement your nutrients. This is just light supplement, and trust me, you feel so much better. Great for seasonal defective disorder, things like that. So fasting. Now, so many of us eat way too much throughout the day. Not just food, but the frequency of our eating. And this is a problem because we have a process in our bodies called autophagy. And autophagy is the cellular cleanup. It goes around and cleans up these dead and debris cells that kind of build up throughout the days and our lives. And when we're constantly eating, this process gets stopped because insulin, which is the primary energy storing hormone, stops this process. So you don't have to eat like breakfast snack, lunch snack, dinner snack. It's not very smart. And it may have its place somewhat in the bodybuilding industry, but like in terms of metabolism and all that, it's not a good thing. Because you hear people say you gotta eat 6 times a day, 8 times. That's look, our ancestors are not eating 6 to 8 times a day. I know that for sure. And other benefits of fasting include
so
it being
like
a hormetic. Go ahead.
Sorry. So like on that fact about like the relationship between bodybuilding and then what you're talking about, what's your what kind of is your reasoning why it's not good to eat 6 to 8 times a day?
Yeah, so what I'd like to talk about with autophagy, that would be the number one thing. And also, the idea of fasting is giving our bodies a break. Like if we're having because we have to understand that digestive process takes an immense amount of energy. Like it's not just that you eat the food, but like all the processes it takes, like turning that food into your tissue takes a lot of energy. So this is why when people go on fast, they seem to have this energy freed up and cleared up because they're not using all this energy to digest food. So some ways you can actually go about this is number one way is intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is basically eating or not eating 12 to 16 hours a day, and this includes sleep. So an example would be not eating at 8 a.m. I'm sorry, you can stop eating at 8 p.m. and then you can start again at 8 a.m. That would be an example of 12-hour fast. You can extend this to 16 hours. Some people do more, but I like to keep the recommendation is 12 to 16. It depends on you. And this is again like hormetic stressors. When you first start doing this, it may be very difficult for a few days, and then your body's going to get used to it, and like, eventually you're going to not want to do it. And then you can upgrade that to 16 hours or whatever you're comfortable with doing, and it's very beneficial, man. And then you can do a 24-hour fast. I personally do 16 hours a day, and then I do a 24-hour fast once a month. I do a 5 to 7 day fast twice a year. And there's certain things you can do on a fast, like there's certain things that can amplify it, like amino acids, the supplement form, green tea, coffee, like certain things that can help amplify the fast. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think I've heard a lot about like Kevin Gates. He does this pretty consistently, and he's done up to like 40 days worth or something crazy like that is what I've
Really?
heard. Yeah, no, it's a whole new level. So I'd look into him for sure, but I've done the intermittent fasting before too, and that works. It does work really well. I think doesn't it increase like your human growth hormone too?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
So
that's the thing. Like HGH helps protect muscle, so it's kind of we think we lose all this muscle, and that may be the case if you're hyper stressed and like it's not uh, something they should be doing in the first place, depending on your state of health. But HGH is a protector of muscle.
yeah, so like as far as someone that is in a place to do fasting, what would you describe that person as being like? What would that ideal person be?
So the majority of people, vast majority, can do intermittent fasting. So that's a simple 12 to 16 hours. But then maybe if you have a chronic disease, and then I don't know, depending on the disease, because there's some people who have like a cancer per se, and they go on this long fast, and their body literally eats the tumor. There's many cases of this. So I mean, I wasn't always able to do a 1 day fast or 5 day fast. I kind of worked my way up to it. Ultimate thing is to listen to your body. Like if you're just going to go throughout the day and you're not able to do anything and you're just angry at everybody, maybe not do it. Just work your way up
Yeah,
to it, man. It's a process, but it's definitely a powerful tool if we can amplify that.
yeah, maybe a good way to do it would be like on a weekend or something for some
Yeah,
people,
like
or do like a 2 day.
yeah, just kind of make sure you don't got too much going on. Make sure you got got things set up, got a good state of mind going into it, and yeah, man, a lot of benefits. You want me to get into the other side of the stress equation, the other five to
Yep.
release stress? Yeah. All right.
Go
So
for it, man. Yeah.
yeah, so those are the hormetic ones. Now, this side is going to be more relaxing, like more like when you have this overloaded stress bucket, even if with all these hormetic stressors, like how can we balance that out? How can we empty the bucket faster and an intelligent way? Number one way is meditation. Now, think of meditation as brain training. So we live in a world of distractions today. We got like all these things coming from all over the place, whether it's TV, whether it's people, circumstances. Like, how valuable is it to train our mind to be more focused? Like, 'cause that's essentially what it is. And there's so many different forms of it, of course. Like, being able to be in a state of equanimity, being able to relax, being able to have awareness of how we respond to things. We talk about personal development, clean mentality, right? Well, that starts with awareness. Like, how can we be more aware of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis? And meditation is such a great tool for that. And the idea of meditation is not just to be peaceful while meditating, but actually take that practice and take it out in the real world, because we're literally training our mind to be at peace. So you can be at a mindfulness meditation is the most basic form of it. So basically just sitting in a spot and you're kind of just observing your breath, your thoughts, your mind. And the key is not to judge your thoughts. Like it's okay. Like it's not about having no thoughts or anything. It's not about being perfect, but essentially it's just sitting in the space. Cause so many of us, man, we have static on the line. Like we can't tune into who we are. And most of us don't even know what we want. We don't know what our purpose is. And that's very unfortunate. But doing things like this can help us make progress in that area. So number two here is along the same lines is moving meditation. Because like I said, a lot of us, we have trouble getting into that relaxed state. Even like so many of us, we can't sit still for too long. And moving meditation is a great antidote for that. So things like walking, Tai Chi, Qigong, basically these light movements that help us get in this somewhat of a flow state, kind of like working on our minds, our thoughts, and all that. And I like to talk about something called qigong. This is essentially a 5,000-year-old practice of Chinese medicine. It translates to energy work, but what it is light movements, basically training your mind and your body to be in coherence, focus on your breath and your movements, and you develop a very good mind-body connection with this. And this has actually been used for like a lot of healing in Chinese clinics. By the way, there's actually a lot of good research in terms of like cancer and whatnot, and that may be surprising. And like I would use it more as an adjunctive therapy, but there's so many like when you talk about like qigong masters and whatnot, like they can really do some impressive healing on this, and because you're stimulating all these things, I don't know if I need to get into, but just starting off as a foundational practice is a good idea. And I wouldn't just do some random YouTube video because you may do more harm than good. Like you can do some online courses or maybe look for a teacher nearby. That's a good idea.
Okay.
So number 3 on this list is going to be something called breath work. Now, breath work is very important, but before I get into that, like what are the basics of breathing? Because a lot of us, man, we're breathing incorrectly. Like we're breathing through our mouth. We don't have good posture. And why this is an issue is because our nose is designed to breathe primarily. We have something in our nose called primary cilia, and this is designed to filter out all the toxins and viruses that we breathe from the air. Our mouth does not have these filters. And when we breathe through our nose, we actually have 6 times more nitric oxide than our mouth. And nitric oxide is this chemical that basically is vasodilatory. And this is very good for killing viruses and whatnot. So
Huh.
stimulating blood flow and all these things happens through the nose. So keep that in mind as we go in a little further. So this, along the same lines, man, it's breath work. It's about building equanimity, like having this internal fortitude while you're going through hard circumstances, because we're all going to come through things. But if we can have this internal fortitude that is built through breath work, that's going to be very powerful. And we can do this. I like to talk about 3 different practices with this. Alternate nostril breathing. We have carbon dioxide retention, and then box breathing. So alternate nostril breathing has a lot of good research on this. It's basically covering up one of your nostrils while you're breathing in through the other one, and then covering up that opposite nostril, breathing out the other nostril, and then breathing in that one. So it's this alternate thing, and it's very good for brain cohesion, like kind of aligning the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. So carbon dioxide
Huh.
retention is along the lines of we breathe too much. Like most of us breathe way too much per minute. And this expels a lot of carbon dioxide. And when we breathe in, we inhale it, of course, and we breathe out, we exhale it. But the thing is that our exhale is supposed to be slightly longer than our inhale. So when a carbon dioxide retention breath would be like 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 8, 4. And this kind of trains us to breathe less and at a normal rate, because it kind of helps this pattern that we've been in of over breathing. Now, box breathing has been used by like Navy SEALs, combats. It's taught very prominently. This is very good for anxiety, very good for like because the SEALs they do this type of breath work before missions, and essentially what it is 4 second in, 4 second hold, 4 second out, 4 second hold. So you're holding on inhale and the exhale, and you're holding 4. So it's like a box, and you can play around with this maybe 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and very good
Yeah.
in terms of that.
So something they taught in the army is when you're on a rifle range and you're sighted in on the target and you're trying to hit a 300-meter target. When they teach you breath work, that's part of their routine is to breathe in, and then on your out you pull the trigger on your exhale. And it what it does is it keeps you from doing that like jolt. You're just more focused in, and so it's kind of relating to your thing about Navy SEALs using it. I think that's one of the reasons they are taught that too. So
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, interesting stuff. So the last 2 here is Forest bathing. Now, forest bathing, this has been kind of popularized in the 80s by the Japanese. They actually use a term called Shinrin-yoku. And this is basically going in the forest and just relaxing, because how they developed it in their culture is they had all these businesses and like people were working more. They kind of got away from nature in a way, and the diseases kind of went up, and the stress went through the roof. And what happens in the forest is the trees produce something called phytozymes. Now, phytozymes are these molecules that it's kind of like essential oils, but the trees produce it in a way, and you can breathe it in there. And these have been shown for like immunity, relaxation. Like these are the number one thing from the trees, basically. And it's just the thing is, man, like we need nature. Like we need to be in nature somewhere. It doesn't have to be a forest, doesn't have to be forest bathing, but just getting outside in nature, like it's another one of those inputs. Like I said in the beginning, health is not just one thing. Nature is one of those inputs that we need. So, just while you're in there, kind of unplug in a way. Like get away from your devices, just be. That's it, just be. Like, can we do that?
Right.
Just like not just have things in our mind, just because when we do this, insights just kind of flow. Like when I go in there, like it's helps me prepare for so many things. I'm fortunate enough to have one across the street. I go in every morning, and when I do this, I just feel so much better. When I'm done, I feel if I felt like some type of anxiety, it's usually alleviated, and it's such a great practice, man. If you can find a forest nearby, it's a great thing. Last up, we
I'm
got
with you on
adaptogens.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I did today.
yeah, yeah, man. It's definitely a great tool. So adaptogens are this class of herb that are designed to help you adapt to stress, just like the name. Now, for it to be an adaptogen, it has to have three things. It has to be known as a tonic, and a tonic is something you can take on a daily basis, and it's safe. Like a lot of things you got to cycle, and tonics you can take every day, and it's all good. Also, it works on multiple systems, so it helps balance all the systems at once in a way. Like a lot of things, they just work on one thing. Like a drug is you pinpoint one thing, but then and by the way, drugs, they have like most of them are they're coming from nature. But the thing is that they chemically alter it and they isolate the compounds to make them more powerful in a way. But now you're left with all the side effects. The thing about side effects is they're really direct effects because everything is connected in the body. It's not like you just do this one thing and it only affects that. No, everything is connected. So within this adaptogen category, my favorite, like I talked about, is medicinal mushrooms. Now, there's four different categories of mushrooms. You have the culinary, which is like the white button mushroom, the portobello, and like the cooking ones. Now, these are like they're not so plants and mushrooms are not in the same category. Mushrooms are known as a fungus, but in terms of the culinary, you can kind of think of those as nutritional in terms of vegetables. So next we got the medicinal ones, which we're going to be talking about. Now, these have been used for thousands of years in medicine. Like reishi, I'll talk about in a minute. That is, so there's something called the materia medica in ancient Chinese medicine. Reishi is known to be the number one thing above everything. Like they listed reishi as the number one herb for all things, and
Huh.
it's that powerful. So all these have ancient stories. So say chaga is grown in Russia and Northern America, and it's on these birch trees, right? And it kind of acts as interestingly like a cancer to these trees. Now, what happens is that chaga has been shown to boost natural killer cells or NK cells upwards of 300%. Now, NK cells
Wow.
are these cells that get around in our bodies, take around any type of rogue pathogen in our bodies, like any type of virus, any type of cold we may be dealing with. Chaga increases that by 300%. Also, chaga is the number one source of melanin. We're talking about sunlight, increases your source of melanin in the skin. Melanin is this massive antioxidant, and chaga has it in there. Another thing it has is SOD, or superoxide dismutase. SOD is this antioxidant that helps us. It's like, so we can get antioxidants from the outside, but when we can build antioxidants internally, that's going to be the most powerful thing. And chaga helps you do that. So the thing about chaga, I'll note lastly, is that going back to cancer, it actually has a lot of benefits on that. It has, like, if you just go to your search engine they go to, type in chaga and cancer, you're going to be blown away by the studies that, like on PubMed. It's kind of just things that if you don't know about it, you don't know. That's the thing. Like, This is why we do what we do to get this message out there. So, and
Right.
also known as the king of mushrooms. Chaga is the king of mushrooms. So, reishi, this is very similar in terms of NK cells. It helps you 300% as well. And reishi is known as the queen of mushrooms. And what this does is mainly for rest and relaxation. That's what we can think of. So, like, there's a study I always go back to in the Journal of Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. It's shown that reishi has been significantly been proven to decrease sleep latency, which means it helps you fall asleep faster, helps you improve REM sleep and non-REM sleep. So basically, helping your sleep cycles. So reishi is very good for that. So cordyceps. Now, this one has a story, man. Like, so this has been only allowed to have by the royal family and emperor, and it would be
Huh.
caught. If you were caught with this, you would be, death was punishment. So it's very cool to have access to these things these days, man. And the thing about this, it can be grown on logs, but also like caterpillars grow these things on them. It's very interesting. And so NK cells, it goes about 200%. But the thing about this, it's more of the athletic mushroom. So it's very good for performance. Like people in the Olympics, they use this. Athletes, it's very good for lung capacity, very good for endurance. So cordyceps is good for that. The last one I'll talk about here is lion's mane. So lion's mane, there's something called the doctrine of signatures. This is basically how food functions, how it smells, how it looks in nature is kind of designed for like those benefits in a way. Like so lion's mane, it looked like this bundle of neurons, and it is one of the only things that has been shown to stimulate neurogenesis is the creation of new neurons. Now, neurogenesis only takes place in two areas of the brain: hippocampus and olfactory bulb. So that's the memory center and like the smelling center. So it
Huh.
helps increase brain cells in there. This is so important because our brain used to think like we can never get these cells back. Like once they're gone, they're gone. But we know that's not the case anymore, especially with neuroplasticity and the adaptability of the brain. But of course, exercise is great for that. But taking in compounds like this is great as well. It's been used in traumatic brain injuries. It helps increase BDNF. So lion's mane is ideal. And how to use these things, I want to talk about. So, like I talked about before, quality is very important because you can tier all these benefits, but if you're just getting company X, you're not getting all the benefits. Here's why. So, there's something called a dual extraction. A dual extraction is a hot water extraction and an alcohol extraction, or a decoction and a tincture, two different names for it. And you need both of these things to extract all the benefits out of the mushrooms because these mushrooms have this thing called chitin around them. It's like this lobster shell. You cannot eat it. Most of them, actually. You can actually eat lion's mane, but other ones you want to stay away from. And so you need to extract the benefits out of this with these methods. The problem is that most of these companies do either or. So they're either doing the hot water or they're doing the alcohol extraction. So you're only getting half the benefits. So do your research, make sure you're getting from a good company. Also, when it comes to these, you want to look for synergistic herbs. Our ancestors never would have one thing. Like it would always be a combination of things. So there's certain herbs that work better with others. Kind of like I talked about the heat cold, it's a synergistic effect. And there's certain companies that have this for you. I don't need to go through like the synergistic herbs with the mushrooms. It's not really important. And lastly, vitamin C is known as a biopotentiator. A biopotentiator helps activate the nutrients that otherwise would not be activated in a particular food. So, say, take collagen, for example. When you take collagen, you don't want to just take collagen because vitamin C helps with the synthesis of that collagen. And this is very good for these mushrooms in a sense. So, and last point on this is taking it with a fat. So, what I like to do is taking it, because I take one of these mushrooms elixirs from Four Sigmatic every morning. And basically, I add something called MCT oil or medium chain triglyceride oil. It's
Yep,
a
I've heard
fraction
of
of coconut
that.
oil. Yeah. And so putting this in there, because to get the benefits of the fat soluble vitamins in there and all the benefits, I want to take it with some type of fat. And MCT oil, by the way, it's instant brain food. So it's kind of great for it doesn't have to go through the digestive process. It goes straight to the liver, straight to the brain. Great stuff.
Heck yeah, man. Holy cow. You're like an encyclopedia for hermetic stressors and whatever I can come up with nutrition wise. You got all of it right there.
Man,
So I'm
like
impressed, man.
with people,
Um,
if I can say, like with people, like in America, man, we're really suffering. Like, with 60% of us have at least one chronic disease. We have over 40% of people have obesity. We have, in terms of that, we have about 75% are overweight. So we have more people with obesity than are overweight, and more people that are overweight than actual at a healthy weight. We have 120 million Americans with prediabetes or diabetes. 60% of us have at least one thing, one type of issue with our heart. So, like, we're not doing well as a society, and doing these practices can really, because we don't understand, like, once we have a sense of resilience within ourselves, once we take these practices on, like, we just, it's, life is so much easier in a way. It's not like things get easier, it's like you get better, right? Like,
Right.
being able to have this fortitude to go through life, and because, like, we talk about clean mentality, it's about being strong, man. And in order to do that, you can't just do like random things. Like, there's certain practices, certain mindsets, certain habits you have to implement in order to live the life that you want.
100%, man. Yeah. So it's, that's kind of the goal and the vision here is like to provide a provide habits that we could take and use every day to uh better yourself and to get away from this chronic obesity and all these like chronic diseases that people have and all this different these things that we have in America that are just so prevalent and it's horrible and it shouldn't be the case but it is because the reality is the system wants you fat, wants you broke, wants you win disease, so you use their big pharma products. It's just a revolving wheel. So yeah,
Yeah,
I really appreciate you talking on all of
yeah.
that for sure, man. So
Bro,
what's
hey, I'm gonna get a sip real quick. That's cool. A sip of water.
so yeah, as far as nutrition goes, like what are some of the foundational principles you're using around?
Definitely, man. So when I like to talk about health, there's, everybody has their certain habits that they implement, right? But when it comes to nutrition, there are foundational pillars that work for everybody. So number one is going to be eat real food. So an example I like to make of this is to have a hunter gatherer. You have him in your kitchen, right? What is he going to recognize? He's going to recognize meat. He's going to recognize vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, grains, all these things. I promise you, he's not going to recognize Lucky Charms, right? So it's about having this, having real food is the number one pillar. So transitioning number two is going to be eat organic. So why is this important? So pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides. The suffix "cide" means to kill, and it does this by getting rid of the pests by disrupting their nervous system or their endocrine system. So being neurogenic or estrogenic. And we think about us, it's not about killing us in a way yet, but we have a lot of research showing that it does the same things. Like, it disrupts us in that type of way. But what I want to talk about this is we have the microbiome. The microbiome is made up of these tiny microorganisms, and there's a plethora of research showing how these things disrupt our microbiome, almost as a mild antibiotic in a way. So that's why eating organic is important, and it's not about being perfect, but it's about progress. So the more progress that we can make in that, the better. All right. So number three, we got eating locally. Eating locally is important because if we get food shipped across from the countries, instant that food is picked, the nutrients get zapped in a way. So eating the food closer to the source, you're gonna have more nutrients within that food. So going to farmers markets, Whole Foods, uh, local as you can is gonna have more nutrients. Number four is eating according to your genetics. Now, there's something called epigenetics, which is basically control above the genes, and this is how everything that we do influences that we take on impacts our gene expression. So within that, we have nutrigenetics, nutrigenomics, how the food impacts our gene expression. So we have, if we have a gene for diabetes, does not mean that we have uh, diabetes in our future. What it means is that we have a presupposition to it, but we can make certain lifestyle decisions in order to circumvent that. So just being aware of these things, it's not an exact thing with genetics. It's just something to be aware of. Number five is eating according to our ancestors. So whatever your heritage is say you're from a Mexican heritage. Okay. Now, if you all of a sudden do not eat anything that a traditional Mexican heritage diet would have, your genes are going to be missing something because your genes expect you to eat certain things. So just eating according to your own bloodline is actually a thing that can be beneficial to your health as well. It's not to be perfect because we have a lot of great things these days, but it's about adding those foods in is awareness. Last principle about foundations is customize your own diet. Customizing your own diet is very important because there is no one size fits all diet. You have to do what works for you while relying on foundational principles. So, depending on your state of health, your state of mind, that will all go into your decisions. Ultimately, experiment and listen to your body. So, those are the foundational things. So, when it comes to the myths and things to avoid, number one thing to avoid is vegetable oil. Now, vegetable oil is very interesting. So, that contains corn, canola, cottonseed, safflower, sunflower, and soybean. Those are the 6 ones. There's 2 others that are minimally used. So, you got oat oil and grapeseed oil, but you don't really need to worry about those. Now, why these are damaging? So, we have 40 to 100 steps to process these oils, each one requiring their own factory, as opposed to olive oil, which just takes like a few steps, like crushing olives. And why these are so damaging, I can get into a lot, but we have omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. Now, these are polyunsaturated fats. Now, we need these. It's about the ratios. So a 1:1 to 1:4 is a good balance in our bodies. Now, these oils have like a 1 to 100. All right. So it's extremely inflammatory. Now, the omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. The omega-6s are inflammatory. Now, it's kind of oversimplification, but basically it's about the ratios. And a lot of us are walking around today with like a 1 to 20. So which just means chronic inflammation, which is the basis of chronic disease in the first place, which is not. So swapping out your oils is the number one thing you can do to avoid nutritionally. And so using things like coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, macadamia nut oil, these things are changing out your oils, man. You would, trust me, you're going to feel so much better. Just give it a try. And number 2 is sugar. Now, everybody knows this, but why? So most of us are eating like 160 pounds of sugar a day, or I'm sorry, a year in the United States. And sugar, there's something called AGEs. Acronym is literally AGE, all right? Advanced Glycation End Products. This is basically sugar binding to the protein within our bodies and damaging them. So it kind of causes acute inflammation. But the thing about the difference between these two is that sugar can be processed very quickly. But the vegetable oils, they take a long time to because they create our cell membranes. So they're kind of with our bodies for months, as opposed to sugar, which is kind of in and out. It's not good to have it all. And insulin is a number 1 primary fat storing hormone, which is very high when you consume a lot of sugar. So the basis of diabetes, and diabetes is that. So when it comes to things to the myths, 3 things here. Cholesterol. It's not all bad, people. So cholesterol, we hear HDL, LDL. High density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein. Now, did I say cholesterol at all? No. It's because these are carrier molecules within the body that carry cholesterol to where it needs to go, whatever it is in the body. So we hear about HDL being good, LDL being bad. Now, this is a vast oversimplification because we need both of them. Now, LDL can become problematic if 2 things take place: high amounts of inflammation or high amounts of glycemic variability, like we just talked about. Under this case, the LDL gets converted to something called VLDL, or very low dense lipoprotein. Now, this is an issue because VLDL gets caught up in our arteries and things like that. And so it's not the LDL itself, it's by living a unhealthy lifestyle that it gets caught up in these arteries. And again, it's about the ratios with this as well, like a 1 to 3 LDL to HDL ratio is more important than the actual amounts. And what are the benefits of cholesterol, real quick? Why do we have it? Like we talked about sunlight and vitamin D. We need cholesterol to convert UVB into sunlight through the cholesterol within our skin. Now, we make 90% of the cholesterol within our own bodies independent of diet. So diet is a very small percentage of the cholesterol. So we're trying to avoid all these cholesterol-rich foods, and really our bodies need it, which is why it creates 90% of it. And our brain creates it, and it has it on tap, essentially. So there's that. Now, number 2 is going to be salt. Now, salt, again, it's not all bad. There's a difference between salt and sodium, all right? Sodium is this isolated thing that you find in processed salt, way different than a high-quality sea salt like Celtic salt, Redmond real salt, black rock salt. Real salt has well over 80 minerals in it, while processed salt has just a few and is bleached, has all these things that you just do not need. Anti-caking agents. You do not want that salt. Now, why salt, they say, is unfortunately bad is because that raises blood pressure, which it can. What people don't understand is the research is done on sodium, isolated sodium chloride, not actual salt. When you actually look at research that's done in real salt, it doesn't happen. So we need salt for our adrenal glands, minerals, all these types of things. And it's more so about quality, because the vast amount of salt that people are taking in is through processed food, like the nonsense in there. So, and how this all started is rat studies who were given like 50 to 100 times the original amount of salt. And that was the basis of it causes high blood pressure, which is kind of ridiculous. And last thing here is avoid saturated fat and red meat. Like I hear this all the time, man. Like it's like a badge of honor. Like I don't eat red meat, right? Now,
Right.
if people want to do that for like their ethics or whatnot, it's all good. But in terms of like saturated fat, we have to look at the science in terms of epidemiology and real world clinical trials. The difference between these two is that epidemiology is developed for a hypothesis. So you take this hypothesis and you test it in the real world clinical trials. That causes facts. Epidemiology is observational. So when you take these two and you look at the research that people are saying to avoid saturated fats, all epidemiology. It's not real world clinical trials. So the thing of epidemiology, you take these people who are eating this lifestyle, they do their best to get confining factors and whatnot. But the thing is, like, you can't isolate it. You can't really know the cause. They can be smoking for all you know. They could be taking all these things, and it could be like they do a test like fast food. They'll do like fries and a burger and whatever they're having, and they blame it on the red meat. That's just an example. Like we've been having this for hundreds of thousands of years, and I don't know how deep I get into protein. I'll probably skip that, but basically, saturated fat makes up our cell membranes. It's not something to avoid. It's a healthy fat, like the oils that we talked about earlier, like the polyunsaturated fat seed oils that we talked about. That's the things we really want to avoid.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you touched on the different oils for sure. Like, and along with salt and along with sugar, like those are so many things that, most people just don't even think about using. They just, you know, that's probably most prevalent for causing
Absolutely, man.
issues. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's marketing because the marketing they take vegetable oil as a term, but none of them are vegetables. It's all seeds and grains. So it's not like broccoli or kale oil. That's another thing to keep in mind.
right. So it's kind of yeah, it's the marketing. It's like, oh, it's vegetables. It's good. No.
Yeah, I mean,
So
yeah.
yeah, to like kind of break down that part about LDL cholesterol, what like you're basically saying with cholesterol that we should probably not be living a sedentary lifestyle because that's where that buildup really occurs, right?
So the oxidation of LDL is through high amounts of inflammation. Of course, that can be sedentary lifestyle, but it can be a lot of things. It can be lack of sleep. It can be uh, consuming these vegetable oils that we talk about, and then glycemic variability, which is basically the amount and the how high our blood sugar spikes throughout the day. So sleep is actually one of the number one things that causes blood glucose dysregulation. So that's something people don't think about. It's not just about diet. So like there's research showing that one night of sleep deprivation, like 5 hours, 6 hours, makes you as insulin resistant as a type 2 diabetic. But this can be
Wow.
easily reversed just by getting enough sleep the next day. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you touching on that. So, yeah, man. So, where can the listeners kind of find you and your brand and then more about the wellness space?
Definitely, bro. So you can find me at anthonygastella.com. I got a podcast. Had Easton on recently. It was a very special interview uh, where we talk about all things wellness, personal development, mindset. And then I do health coaching, which you can find on the site. You can contact me through the form on the site. Social media is Anthony G _120. I also got a lot of free content, a lot of articles I write, a lot of things I do on there. And social media is just X, by the way, just X. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely like the posts the blog posts. Definitely good stuff that you write for free. So,
yeah, man.
um yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show again. Or not again, but thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, man, it's really special. Appreciate you.
You are on a mission. A mission. has ever seen.